we want to delve into the making of this film and all that informed and inspired Del Zamora and the team. So with that, I want to just ask the most important question is, why did you make this? Why did you make this film?
Well, I'm from New Mexico originally. I'm born in Roswell, which everybody may ask me if I'm an alien. And when we moved to Albuquerque, and my mother, who I just mentioned earlier, my father left when I was 5, and I had 2 sisters, newborn and 1.5. And my mother raised us, worked a full-time job, and got her BA summa cum laude from University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And they got her MFA summa cum laude from Sacramento State. So my mom was like a hero to us, you know, to my sisters and I. And she would have got so mad, because I was a straight A student, that in 1969, when they had killed Ruben Salazar, there was a big protest in Albuquerque at Lincoln Park. And my friend Robert Marquez and I rode our bicycles there. And our moms would have killed us if they'd have known. And we came right upon it. And we were always afraid of cops. We were always afraid because they loved lording it over us. They loved like scaring us just to have fun, driving by like that and looking at us. And we came around a bend, and these Black Berets, which are the New Mexico version of the Brown Berets, were turning over 2 police cars right as we came around the corner. And I remember we were a little worried because they have guns, right, the cops, but there was like 500 gente, and there was like 20 cops. And they realized, well, that's like 120 bullets, and then we're dead, right, because they would just shredded them apart. And it was the first time that I ever saw policemen afraid of us. Like they were backing up, and the cars were being turned over, and they had their guns, but they realized like this could go really bad. And I was short. I was always really short as a kid. And I remember looking up at these Black Berets, and they're yelling like, "Man, these guys are like Spider-Man." Like, these guys don't have any fear at all, you know? And so that always struck with me. And then, of course, my mother was reading Malcolm X and Soul on Ice because she was in school, right? So I would read the books. And the Malcolm X really hit on me a lot, because the one quote about who teaches you to hate yourself, who teaches you to hate the color of your skin, you know, who you are. You're not born like that. Someone teaches you to have self-loathing about that. And in our community, we do have a lot of self-loathing. I mean, because they're constantly hammering us, you know, and they also want us to assimilate, but we'll never assimilate because Mexico's right there. See, the Italians and the Irish and everything, there was a whole ocean that separated them. So their culture could never reinforce themselves, so they were for a couple of generations, and then they were able to sort of join the assimilation, and that'll never happen here. So the real reason why I got lucky, Jose Luis Valenzuela, the original director of the play, called me and he goes, "Del Zamora, ¿cómo estás?" And he's from Mexico City. And I said, "Muy bien, ¿qué estás haciendo?" He had directed me in a play with Trinidad Silva, you know, rest in peace, Trini, one of the greatest Chicano actors and one greatest souls ever. He was on Hill Street Blues for a lot of years. And he said, "Del, we have a play that won the contest in East LA at Plaza de la Raza, The Last Angry Brown Hat. It's about the Brown Berets. Come read it now." So I went there, and Mike Gomez was there, Richard Iniguez, and Sal Lopez were there. And they gave it to me, and it was 12 pages. And I go, "¿Qué es esto?" I read it. This is what? He goes, "It's going to be a play." And I was like, "Well, it's a mess, bro." He goes, "Well, you know," I said he never studied theater, so he doesn't know the structure of theater. He knows movies. He wants to be a movie. And so he said, "Del," I always remember this, "Del, I need the greatest Chicano actor who's also crazy to play this role." And I was like, "Oh, I like that." So we then workshopped the play, turned it into an hour-long show. It toured the country. We played the Smithsonian, Yale, Notre Dame, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, UC Berkeley, UCLA, USC. But unfortunately, because there's very little product for us where we're the leads. Ben Affleck plays Tony Mendez in Argo. You know, there's very few projects. So because of that, there was a lot of bushwhacking of the cast, and I'm the only one that remained from the original, and they try to get rid of me too, and that's part of the problem too that I think we face is that we have so little, and when something comes of value, then we fight over it.
Well, the good thing is that the film did get made, and I do want to ask you a little bit more about how you describe your inspiration, because you talked about the superheroes and superheroines who are a part of our everyday life.
Yeah,
your mother and the cholos out there in the street wearing the berets saying, "Get out of my body, Chota, you ain't gonna be doing this anymore." So we're gonna I want to ask a little bit more about the roundedness of all your characters, because they're very believable and real. But right now, let's back up a bit, and I want to ask you about what you learned about the berets in making the film.
Well, I had always been interested in them. I was always interested in standing up to the system too, because when I was a kid, once I was in 4th grade in Flora Vista Elementary, and if we spoke one word of Spanish, we were spanked. And the name of the school is Flora Vista Elementary. You know, it's just absurd. So I was playing with Billy Ray and Johnny Smith, and I was like, and he goes, "I'm Superman." Shh. And Billy Ray goes, "I'm Batman." And I go, "I'm Spider-Man." And Billy Ray turns to me, he goes, "You can't be Spider-Man, you're Mexican. Peter Parker, Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, not a Mexican amongst them." And they both laughed at me, and I was a smart kid, I always was this little, so I always had a comment, and I didn't have any comment. And I went home, and we were real poor, but I'd get my cousin's comic books, and I started looking at them, and I was like, we're nowhere. And if you really look at the history of the media in this country, we're nowhere. Or like I remember the real McCoys, "God dang it, Pepina, you messed up again, get over here." You know, and, "Oh, Senor McCoy, I'm so sorry." You know, it was always subservient, or it was, you know, "Arriba," you know, the raton, and I'd be like, "What is the raton?" You know, I mean, I love Speedy Gonzalez, but can we be something else too? You know, so it always bothered me, and I think that's why I was interested in being in to try to change it. And I'm glad I didn't know how entrenched it was, because
Yeah.
if I'd have known a lot of things I knew, I probably wouldn't have tried to do this business, or I'd have tried to go to Europe.
Well, but I mean, you're in over 200 films, right?
278 speaking roles.
So no, you have made an intervention, to be sure.
But the berets, to answer your question,
Yeah,
on the berets, what I learned was that I never quite understood why the government considered them so dangerous, until I realized that ideas are dangerous to them. Ideas of equity, equality, you know, having our teachers teach us instead of, "Yeah, remember the Alamo." You know, they always say, you know, "Oh, get past it, no, you know, that's ancient history, the blah, blah, blah." Yeah, but remember the Alamo, and you guys teach it. So they don't even know, the system doesn't even realize how Eurocentric it is. They have no idea. And so that was the thing that I thought, I understood that, yeah, there were radical elements of the Brown Berets that we're doing, but you get tired. You get tired, you've had it. So you're like, okay, we're gonna raise some pedo, and we're gonna burn, we'll blow stuff up, and we'll do whatever we gotta do to get you guys to stop doing this, because we pleaded with you. Our parents have kowtowed to you on their knees, and you're still not good enough for you. We fought in your wars. You set us up to fight in the wars. And it's still never enough. It's still never, you know, and oh, go back to Mexico, and then Mexicanos were pochos, and here we're Mexicans, and so it's you know, so I realized that the Brown Berets, and that's why I wanted to do the movie, because ideas are probably the most powerful thing.
And so you're attracted to the cultural nationalist component, right? The self-love and the defiance and the rejection. But you also in the past have talked about their code of ethics. There's a specific code of ethics. It's almost like a mafia, but a little less destructive. But you've also in this film explored really complex issues. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit more about that, because these characters, the main four, really five, the deceased Frankie himself, all eventually reveal quite a huge level of complexity. And it isn't always clean. So talk a little bit about your decision to go to substance abuse, homophobia, all the sexism. You don't just give us a brown-washed, as it were, portrait that is nostalgic and romantic. There's some messy issues. So talk a little bit about navigating that.
Yeah, well, when we did the play, we would talk to the students afterwards. We did it at a lot of colleges and high schools, and they would say, "Why do you blame us?" And I thought, I don't like that. I don't want to blame them. It's not their fault. It's the whole setup, as Jojo says, it's so big. And so I tried to convince my partners that were in the play with me that I could make the movie, and they would just laugh at me because they're, Del, you think you can do everything. You can direct and produce and write. Just stick to acting. And I would go, you guys are so wrong. I know what to do with this movie. So to me, can you imagine the movie without the flashbacks? Because that was the movie till last August. We shot the final. I've been working on this movie for 11 years. We shot the garage with the 4 guys 11 years ago this August. Because it's self-funded, there's no money, and then everybody sees me on TV, and even with the 278 speaking roles, this is going to hurt you guys. My average income is $16,800 per year. Because when Ben Affleck takes Tony Mendez, he also takes all the money. And the rest of us have to work for the minimum. And we're in small roles because they don't let us be the heroes. See, like there's this weird thing in American society where they have to be the heroes no matter what. Even if it's Tony Mendez, no, we gotta play it. And there's this weird, like, dude, can anybody else shine? No, it's us. And we must be powerful. So I'm trying to, as much as I can, to counter that, but also our community doesn't see movies as art and as societally important. They see it as entertainment. And that's a big problem. I have a lot of black friends, and when people talk about a movie, they go, "Who's in it?" And if there's no black people in it, they don't want to hear any more about it. But our kids don't even think like that. I'm going to go see Spider-Man 28. And Transformers 72, I hear it's good. We don't think, and so I even tell them, I said, "Don't you care?" And they go, "No, man, I just want to have a good time." But that's also part of the problem, because think about if you're Hollywood, and you make Argo with Ben Affleck playing Tony Mendez, the hero, CIA, so it's not so much you and our hero, but the hero of the story. And we buy tickets to it, which is what happened. So why, if the studios are going to change? They have us.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that and I want to mention something that really struck me as profound and aesthetically innovative and at the same time politically incisive, and that is there are 2 scenes where the youth break the wall, and that becomes testimonial cinematography because you immediately address us. The audience is no longer the audience. I'm thinking of Augusto Boal's Theater of the Oppressed, where the spectator becomes a spectator. You're in this film now. You
it's
don't
interactive.
So that was talk a little bit about that.
And to do that, first off, I want to introduce, because we have 2 of them here.
Okay.
David Rangel, who plays Frankie, right there. Stand up.
All right, there you go, man.
And Jessica Figueroa, who plays Anita.
All right, yeah. Well, they did a great job. That was
fantastic.
A great job. And and this is where we get, the whole genre of testimonial literature and film is about demystifying. It's about calling out the processes by which we become indoctrinated as, to then participate in our own subordination, right, our own oppression. And this film did that. I mean, it reminds me of some scenes in Spike Lee's early films where he would break that. I mean, it's a great technique. Used it very effectively. So where did that come from? Who decided to do that?
I did. What happened was I would talk to people all the time. I would say, you do realize we fought for this country. My grandfather's brother was in the U.S. Army in World War I. I had two uncles who were paratroopers. That's really the story. That porch scene is the story of my people. My two uncles were paratroopers in World War II. Okay, in fact, my Uncle Albert was there at the liberation of Dhaka. Okay, then my Aunt Bella's husband, Juan Flores, was in the Korean War, United States Marine Corps, and my dad was in Vietnam. And I had all these cousins that were in the Air Force during all these Gulf Wars, and some were in the Army and Marines. And I always thought, like, what are they fighting for? We don't get, like, I'm making 16.8, and I'm considered one of the top Latino, and I'm half Apache. And they show me on the list, on Latinos that are alive, I'm 58th, which is pretty good. That means like he's reliable, he's good. I don't get all the Google searches that Danny Trejo gets, but and then on the natives I'm like number 28th, right? So I'm the success story, and look, and I kept thinking, what are my people fighting for? Like it doesn't seem like there's much equity here, right? And then again, I'm pro-immigration. But Mexicanos come here and then they do really well, and they look at it, well, ¿qué chingas trae? Why don't you work harder? They don't understand, like, oh, ¿por qué hablas como así, Pocho? They beat us when we spoke Spanish. No, como que? It's hard for people to understand how it was, and it still is, like in Texas. I mean, look what they're doing in Texas. This movie would not be shown to the colleges in Texas and in Florida. They'd go, no, you're not showing that. That's CRT.
Well, the best thing that can happen is if they ban it. So
right.
You better hope for that.
Yeah, that's what we.
So, because that's that would be some good press. But let me.
Let me do about what I think is really cool about, because you said, why did I come up with that? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've seen a lot of movies, and you start pulling for the heroes, right? You're like, come on, Spider-Man. And you can't help it. That's the movies. They're that way. You start pulling for the heroes, and I was like, well, we're the heroes. In this movie, we're the heroes. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we have an audience, and we have raza in the audience, and we have Anglos in the audience, and I'm not trying to demonize anybody, Anglos, but I'm just saying the Anglo society has always been very oppressive to us. And then you have images on the screen that advocate for raza. Because when they say, why do you hate us? Raza knows, that they're not talking to you. You know who they're talking to. And Anglo people know that they're being spoken to that way.
But they're also talking to raza that are homophobic, and that was a really important intervention you made as well to recover the queer legacies of the movimiento. You reminded me of a great dear friend of mine, Greg Barrios, who was in the movimiento and the queer movimiento, and he had all his writing is intertwined. You can't separate the two.
Right.
And nobody really knows about him yet. Hopefully people will start studying his poetry and his teatro. But he was in the factory with Andy Warhol and in the streets in East LA and in Texas too. He was at Crystal City. Was involved in that whole takeover of the city there and the school board and such. So this is a very important intervention you're making, because you're also telling Raza, why do you hate queer folks? And that was a big intervention. Where did that come from?
That was originally in the play. It was originally in the play. I think the playwright, Alfredo Ramos, that was important to him. And I'm LGBTQ friendly, always have been. My mother raised me to not hate. So having to play the ignorant one, I felt like, well, it's your responsibility.
Well, you did it well. You did it well. Unfortunately and fortunately.
Yeah, and the same thing with the sex scene. I was like, well, it's your responsibility. You got to do this, and so because the other thing is, I'm going to be honest with you. You couldn't have a movie about Brown Berets, and the only time that any sexuality is brought up or depicted only gay. They would be certain aspects of the Brown Berets that are very macho that would come after. It would
be dishonest, yeah, and that's the thing that...
And so I said, well, this sex scene kind of inoculates that, so let's do that, which is a weird thing, like, okay, we're going to inoculate ourselves here with a sex scene. But no one directs a movie in a vacuum. You always affect people that you're telling the story about.
Well, if I can jump in here. There's a lot of layers of different ideologies at play and different forces at play. And what you're talking about is a lot of different cultural nationalisms, right? So let's consider that. You know, we mentioned the series of scholarship that Dione Espinosa did on Chicana Brown Berets in East LA, and 2 books that David Montejano did on the San Antonio, Texas chapter. And both of them deal with the ideological dissensus, the disagreements. So you had the nationalist capitalists and you know, some quasi-socialists, and then communist internationalists, all within that same organization in different chapters. And sometimes the same chapter would have that. One of the things that comes out in those studies, and also in this film, and also in what you're talking about, is the internal contradictions. So, for instance, there was a great spread in the LA Times about how one of the Chicano Brown Berets who had participated in the occupation of Catalina Island is now a prominent Republican, unabashed, ultra-capitalist, and a Chicano nationalist at the same time. Montejano, in his book, talked about how some of these fools, they're mostly gangsters in the San Antonio chapter, wanted to break out of prison Fred Gomez Carrasco. He had taken over the prison and help him get to Cuba and start an insurgency. And I met some of those guys, and they still think like that. It's for real. So there's such a huge range. I was wondering how, if you can wade in and discuss how that is informing the film, and how the film brings out different aspects of that.
Yeah, the main reason I wanted to do the flashbacks was that I thought, okay, everybody here has probably had puppies, right? And so when they're little puppies and you play with them, their teeth are so sharp. They little bite, she's bleeding like for 2 days, damn, right? But when your dog gets older, he can nibble on you, and his teeth have been worn down, right? They're not as sharp anymore. They're not as baby teeth anymore, and everything. And that's how I saw the old cast. They were those old dogs, and their bite didn't bleed anymore. The bite didn't cut. And so I thought it's hard for people to see the movie, because we showed the movie without the flashbacks, and people were like, it's great, it's wonderful, it's everything. And I go, no, we're not finished. Because when we showed them young, those teeth cut. And there we see JoJo's radical, the one that went to Harvard and married the Anglo woman. He's very radical. He's like ready to burst. Right? And you don't see it in the garage till finally he gets really mad. They kind of goad him into it, and then we see that he does have that rage in him. He's still that guy. He just is sort of buried it, and successfully was able to kind of keep it down. And all of a sudden, and that's why he's in the garage, and he gets mad after his flashback. He goes, this place, because it brought in, and he was like, I don't want to do that. He didn't even want to really go. You know, but it's his obligation. And also about it's there when you look at the movie, the ethics of who they are. They're like made men to each other, right? They're not supposed to touch each other. They're not supposed to even disrespect each other. And if you remember, Rude Boy goes, you're disrespecting me, better sit down. And then he grabs Rude Boy. And you notice Rude Boy, remember, he has a knife in his pocket, right, from cutting the lemons, right? And Rude Boy's not a punk, but Rude Boy, he goes like this, and Rude Boy just gets him off him, he throws him, and then Rude Boy doesn't do anything. But in Rude Boy's mind, you crossed the line. You crossed the line. Also going to kill him, that's crossing the line. You're not, under any circumstances, yeah, he shouldn't be messing with the woman, that's crossing the line, but you're not supposed to return that for that. It's not to be tit for tat. But that's the faults of the characters. That's who they are, they're real in that way. And that's why Rude Boy at the end, when they go to hug, he's like, that. I'm gonna go get some beers for the road. And he's ready to leave without even saying anything to him. And when he says, Rude Boy, and he catches him at the door, because the way Rude Boy's like, you put your hands on me. So you're not a real Brown Beret, because I'm a real Brown Beret, because I didn't do nothing to you. You know? And so he gives him his back. He goes, yeah, what? He goes, take care, Colonel. And at that moment, I always thought, because I was directed in the play to come back to him. And I always thought, why do I go back? And it wasn't in the play. He just went back and says, take care, Colonel. And I thought, this is my chance to redeem Frankie. Because there were people that served time, they just wouldn't talk. The informant said, Carlos Montes is running the show, and Carlos came in and he's, not going to cooperate. Okay, well, you're going to Fed prison. So that my thing was like, Frankie served time so that the rest of us could have our lives. And the tear comes because he doesn't even want to hug him, so he pulls him in and then he hugs him and then he cries. And it's a tear of why can't we all be together? Why can't we all just row together, struggle together instead of, it's almost like we love to fight each other instead of fighting the system.
Sometimes, as painful as it is, internal ideological battles do need to get hashed out, and it's never pleasant, sometimes very ugly. We're going through this now at a moment where there are such things as Hispanic serving institutions, which means there's 25% of raza, mostly Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx people, but not exclusively, a lot of Central American descent people as well. We're at a moment where there's a large and growing raza middle class. There is a lot of ideological issues that come with that. Sometimes those issues have to be hashed out, and that's what I appreciate so much about that. That garage was a microcosm of the evolution of a movement into a ideologically complex space that is so dangerous but so necessary to hash out. Even if it makes us enemies, unfortunately, with each other, sometimes you just, things need to be argued. Great that in this film they did have that bond of caring that was from their formation, that it kept them still together, even though they've gone a lot of different directions. And that's one of the strengths that I see in this film. It's just, man, there's just like, in these 5 people, the main actors, there's so much variation. It encompasses everything. And then when you get into the house, in this gender stratified space, it gets even more layered. And then you even break down some of the boundaries of how we have reified race, because there's one Weta, just perfect Spanish, speaks better Spanish than I do.
Yeah.
So I'm saying there's no, there's no binary structures here. I really like that. And I'm thinking it's as complex as a couple of scenes in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. They're just really breaking things down and in group. It was just wonderful scenes where some of the mujeres are talking about colorism and, dating inside and outside of the community, dating within genders, etc. So I do have to commend you for that. Is there anything else in the film that you would like to accentuate? What do you think makes it unique?
Well, I would ask people all the time, why did the Brown Berets form? And it was always general. Police brutality, bad education, lack of opportunities. And I go, but was there a catalyst? Was there one thing? Because I knew what it was. And I would have Apache, so I would ask American Indian Movement the same question. Because those 3 groups were formed in the same year. Mm-hmm. That's not by coincidence. The Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, and American Indian Movement were formed in the same year, right? Why? And the country's done a good job of hiding tracking. That basically, even though our parents paid for all the schools, just like everybody else's parents did, and remember, they thought black people and native people and raza are monkeys. Remember the thinking of the 60s. They're not smart, they're gonna be prostitutes and they're gonna be stealing and we gotta give them a trade, damn it. And they're not smart enough to go to college. Come on, man. That was really how they thought. So even if you were the valedictorian, as her character says, but you have to send in a photo. So that's how they'd catch the black people. Collins, and they go, oh, he's black, kick him. No. He's the valedictorian, we don't care. Right? And the same thing with us. Ramirez well, she's the valedictorian, we don't care. And the proof is there. You can look at the student rolls before that, and you'll see we're not there. And even though we paid for it, but worse off, and Sal Castro, who was the teacher, was the one that identified that they're setting you up by making sure you don't go to college and telling you auto shop and metal shop and wood shop, then you're going to get drafted. And he was fired for telling them. And then the parents showed up and they had to rehire him, right? But see, like telling the truth is bad. That's why, as it says at the end of the movie, 5.5% of the population, that was an undercount, but let's take their numbers because that's what they want to do. And 22% of the casualties, well, how did they do that? They did it with tracking. So I wanted to explain that because even when they did the Walkouts movie, and I was like, why are they so wussy about that? Like, why don't they tell the truth about that? Because that's a hateful thing to do to a people. To take their money, make sure their kids, because they're always saying, they're taking our money and taking it to their kids, redistributing it. No, that's you, cabrones. You're the ones that have always historically done that. You know, and I love, Jojo, who named it Los Angeles? My people or your people? Like, I used to get tired in New Mexico and go, who named it Santa Fe, man? Was that you guys? Like, why are you always acting like we're the foreigners, you're the foreigners? So anyway, so that was pretty much what I really wanted to do, was to just, I thought the most important thing that flashbacks would do was explain tracking, and I thought the second most important thing was to explain that we fought for this country.
You know, I just want to end by saying that this film is entertainment and much more. It is really a complex educational experience, a spiritual experience. I went through a lot of different emotions through many scenes several times, so it takes you for a good ride. And I think that you do leave with hope, but also some understanding that, damn, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I love all of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you all for being here.